Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to 5 in 15, a webinar series from CO, where we promise to give you to deliver 5 interesting, useful, maybe even amusing ideas or points, facts that you can use in your work in strategic marketing and communications, all within the constraints of a 15-minute webinar, because we know you are busy and you have a lot to do. So I'm Mark Gale, CEO of CO, and I got to tell you, I'm excited about our guests today. I've been following this company from Israel, Trendlines, for a number of years, and Sarai Kemp, who is head of deal flow, which is just, I don't know if I've ever met anybody who's head of deal flow before, Sarai, is going to be with us today. And she's going to talk a little bit about what we've been talking about with all these 5 in 15 series of interviews. That is how agriculture and food are evolving and what's going to happen a little bit in the future, because Trendlines funds companies that are really, I guess, arguably forming the future of food and agriculture. So with that as just a little bit of a backdrop, Sarah, I'll let you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about Trendlines.
Thank you, Mark. So I work for the Trendlines. We are an investment company, and we invest in startups along the supply chain of agri and food. And we'll speak, I think, about it later on, what does it mean, agri and food, and not just ag or just food. And my job is really to scout those technologies and startups that we want to invest in, and then to follow up with them and help them develop, mainly on the business side, because those young startups need a lot of guidance. And I've been in the business of ag tech for the last 12 years. So I know a few things. I don't know all, but just a few. And we also seen a lot of technologies. So we also know what they need to be careful for, or what type of strategic partner would be wise for them to engage with, or how to secure the follow-on investment for them. And at the end of the day, we want to monetize on our investments. So
sure,
this is part of our way.
So tell us a little bit now. Thank you for joining us at the end of the day after you put your kids to bed. It's 8 o'clock at night from Israel because we're live.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about your day-to-day. You know, what is your job and what did you do today, Sarai? Tell us.
Okay. So today we worked on our new presentation for our new fund, basically.
Okay.
So we have a new fund, which is a global fund that is going to invest in technologies across the supply chain globally. But beside that, I look at deal flow, and you ask, you might wonder, what is deal flow? So deal flow is all the potential startups that we may want to invest in. So we need to scout, and we do it globally with a focus on Israel because we are based in Israel, but also with a focus on East Asia because we have our subsidiary over there. And we also have partners in the States and in other countries that are also looking at that type of deal flow. And we share the deal flow amongst ourselves. And we need to cherry pick that startup that we would like to invest in. And the best opportunity for us to monetize our investment. And there are different criteria for us to check if this is really the right fit for us.
Okay. Now I know you that helps. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. You mentioned, and we picked up early on and back and forth with you, the term agri-food. Now, we often say food system here, food and agriculture, ag tech, food tech. Now, agri-food isn't a matter of translation from another language to English. It's a very deliberate term that you're using at Trendline. So tell us a little bit about that and why agri-food. And maybe all of us should adopt that, by the way. I don't know.
So
what do you think?
The credit that goes to, not to Trendlines, the credit goes to the main publication of our industry, which is called AgFunder. And I recommend everybody to join the newsletters that they have. And they invented that term a few years ago. And I think it came about because at the beginning, there was startups that are only focusing on ag tech. And this is when we started out 8 years ago investing in this field. Then a few years later, we saw startups that are focusing on food tech. But then we see VCs and other industries looking at both ag tech and food tech, not just from a financial perspective, but think of, any food company today General Mills, Cargill, Tyson, all of them, you can call them food companies, but all of them are putting emphasis on the ag side of things. The emphasis can come from a sustainability perspective. They want to ensure that they source their raw materials in a more sustainable way, or because they want to have increased yield on the produce that they buy, or because they have, for instance, they want to have a specific ingredient that is emphasized in a crop that now they are sourcing. And for instance, this is a company we invested in. The name is Equino with our recent fund, and they do exactly that. So you would classify them as a traditional ag company because they're in the seed business. They have a computational platform to discover new traits, to develop seeds. But the seeds that they are focused on are not your typical soy, corn, or wheat, but they are the food crop that eventually you're going to consume as a consumer.
So direct, not being fed to an animal, fed to a person, but direct consumption.
Yes. So then from a business perspective, they need to speak both to the farmer, because the end customer for them, or the immediate customer for them, is the farmer buying their seeds and planting it. But for them to know what type of seed to develop, they need to go back to the food company and understand from the food company what type of an ingredient that food company is looking to have in that specific crop. So one of the traits that they have, or the breeds that they have, is a pea that has higher protein content inside. And the companies that are buying those peas, they are the Impossible and they're the Beyond. So these are the plant-based alternative burgers.
Plant-based protein.
The main ingredient in those burgers are peas. So now you have an ag company supplying directly. Also, they're going to go through the farmers because the farmers are going to grow the peas, but they are developing a unique product for that food company. So you have the conversion. And since the conversion is happening on a natural scale, then it was also natural to form the name Agrifood.
Agrifood, sure. No, that's a good explanation. And by the way, if just for those who are listening, you should get the Trendlines newsletter. Don't worry, we'll send you a link, and the Ag Funder newsletter as well. It's good information, and even if you scan it, you just kind of keep up on what's happening out there. That's great. And we're going to send you the Econom, and we're going to talk about another startup in a little while too. We'll send you those links, so don't worry about that. Now, Israel. Why Israel? Now, there's also a great book, by the way, Startup Nation, about Israel. Most people don't know it. For reference, here in the US, I mean, Israel, it's about the size of Lake Michigan, folks. Yet some of the code you're using in the interface for Microsoft, for Google, stuff you're using today was written in Israel, invented in Israel, as well as a lot of other things. So Startup Nation for food tech, ag tech. How many did you say? I know how many, but how many did you say startups there are?
I double checked it. It's about 500 startups on an average day. It means that some closes down and some, established, but on every day we have 500 different ag food startups. And I think it really, again, a conversion between what you, Mark, mentioned. So it's been the startup nation. And I don't know if many people know, but Israel has a lot of technologies in the high-tech side of things, in cybersecurity, of course, coming from the military, but also in medical device, and a lot of software and other types of application from IT perspective. But at the same time, Israel, for many years, since its establishment, was a pioneer in agriculture. And I think not many know that. For instance, the Israeli dairy cow, and I come from the dairy business in my previous job, so I know that by heart. The Israeli dairy cow has the highest yield and highest quality if you compare it to all countries for the last decade. So it hasn't changed. We invented the cherry tomato, we invented drip irrigation. So it only makes sense, to converge those two uniqueness that we have in Israel, being a startup nation, entrepreneurial vibe, together with deep roots. They're not so old roots, and this is again an advantage because we don't have really, legacies of farmers after farmers. The son and then the grandson was a farmer, so we don't have agricultural practices. We don't have traditional agriculture, and this is an advantage because when you come to inventing new technology, you need to think out of the box.
Yeah. So they always say now creativity comes out of adversity. So you know, if you're charged with growing food in a desert, you're going to have to figure things out, I guess.
And also,
Um,
we are an isolated country.
yeah.
So you can imagine we're not going to trade with Syria and Lebanon on grains. Uh,
Yeah.
so we
Okay.
have to to rely on ourselves to produce whatever we need.
Yeah. No, a lot of innovation there. Now, you said now startups, so many fail, about 90% fail. But now the startups, you said with Trendlines, have a much higher success rate. So maybe two quick things, because we are going to run out of time here before we know it. We got a little time left. But how do you assess now with all those startups and globally, it seems that from the outside in, this is a small industry, but it's not. There are so many that you could choose from. How do you begin to decide? And how do you nurture to have a higher success rate at Trendlines with startups?
And I think, Mark, what you just said is really the essence of what we do, is really choosing well the technology and then nurturing the technology or the startups. And that what is, I think, the foundation for our success rate, which is about 65% of our portfolio companies succeed. When we look at the technology or company, we look at four pillars. One is the team. This is obvious, I think, for any startup or any company you would want to invest. You want to know if the team that you are investing in can take the company to the next phase, can really develop with the company. But the other three components are more complex to understand. One is the technology. So it needs to be really a groundbreaking technology, something that is different, unique, that can be protected, not necessarily for patent. For instance, softwares are not, you cannot patent them there, but you need to protect them in some way. So it either needs to be very sophisticated software, or you have advances in that software which will take another company years, to overcome that advances. And so the technology, we look at the market size. For us, it needs to be really huge market, huge, billions of dollars.
Okay, so
A
you want to
niche
go broad
market
scale.
or a local solution is not something we're going to invest. I don't say that there's no market for that, but from a financial investor, we need to see a huge return on investment. And a huge return on investment can only come from a very big market size and market need.
Mm-hmm.
And the need needs to be screaming. So it needs to be very obvious to everybody what type of need the farmer is has, or the food company has, not something that you need to explain. And then the technology that you invest really answer that unmet need.
Okay, so now you did your own great setup for another company we're going to talk about that you're funding, and that is aquaculture is a big deal. We know problems with the oceans and changing temperature of the seas in some areas, and also we're trying to grow more seafood. Tell us a little bit about this startup, Viaqua, in aquaculture,
Okay.
because I think that must be one of the reasons you chose that, because potentially aquaculture is also really difficult and has some negatives with it. So tell us quickly a little bit about Viaqua, and then we'll have to finish up here.
So aquaculture, it means the industrial scale or the cultivation of fish in an industry way. So not just throwing your net inside the ocean and picking up whatever you have. And since the change of throwing your net into industrial scale agriculture, a lot of disease and viruses really sprung out in this industry. And there's no real treatment for viruses and bacteria within aquaculture. You give some kind of probiotics and you put it inside the water. And in very high premium fish like salmon, you also inject them one by one with an injection
Not very efficient.
Yeah, not very efficient. So what they are doing is they're using a technology platform based on a biological mechanism that was invented in the Technion, which is a leading tech university in Israel. And that's a delivery mechanism that you can encapsulate any different active ingredients, whether it's the vaccination or it's a boost to the immune system of shrimp or other aquatic creatures. But this is encapsulated in the feed formulation and the pellet of the aquatic creature. So you provide the vaccine or the treatment via the feed. And this is groundbreaking. This is very difficult to do because you have to keep the active ingredient intact, both in the water environment, but also in the gut system or the digestive system of the aquatic creature, and then only to release it and do it whatever it needs to do. So this is the technology we invested from day one. We've keep investing in them. One of the large feed companies also invested in them, which is a strong faith in the technology. And we really love the technology.
Okay, so now we're about at 15 minutes. So if you need to get off, you can get off, but don't get off just yet because we want to talk about two more things. One is, and I know you don't like this word. I don't like this word either, but so you know what's coming. I'm giving you advance warning. So, but sustainability, we haven't come up with a better word, but isn't that where technology, you know, tell us a little bit about your view. So you get to have a crystal ball. You can predict the future a little bit here, Sarai. What, you know, what about agriculture, sustainability, food sustainability? Where are things going? What's the role technology is going to play?
So I can tell you for sure what will not change.
Okay,
so
that's a good way.
I think farmers will still be using chemicals.
Okay.
I don't see a world without chemicals. It will be very difficult to replace completely chemicals because they are very effective in what they do. But at the same time, some of them are not effective anymore because of resistance issues. Some of them are banned of use because of regulation issues. And some of them are just not acceptable by consumers. So all of these three pillars are changing the industry and making the industry think of how to grow more, and you need to grow more in a much more sustainable way. But the sustainability doesn't come because you have to be nice to the environment. It's just because it's the bottom line. It is more efficient from a consumer perspective, from a regulation perspective, and also from efficacy. If you need to have what we call today is the IPM, integrated pest management. So you use a combination of pesticides, both chemicals but also biologicals, because they are much better to treat different types of herbs or different types of insects.
Yes. So you're really seeing sustainability as improvements to agriculture versus abandoning what we might call conventional agriculture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think technology is the future. So all right, so we're out of time, but you know, I'm going to ask you one more question because I think it'll be fun. Is that okay? And that is, tell us a little bit about, now you're not in the States. We would, you know, it's like a farm kid, somebody who grew up on a farm. We have that term. Probably don't have exactly the same term for a kid who maybe grew up on a kibbutz with a dairy or something.
Yeah.
But so you're not a farm kid, but you got thrust into agriculture. So tell us a little bit about your exposure to agriculture, and then we'll wrap up here.
Yeah, for sure. It was my first day encountering agriculture, my first day at work for the dairy agtech company that I used to work for in Israel. And I knew nothing about dairy farms. I knew nothing about a cow. I didn't grow in a kibbutz. And then the first day, my boss told me, listen, if you want to know the business, the first thing you're going to do is milk a cow. So I went into the early morning shift in a kibbutz and I milked the cow, several cows. And I did it for 1 week until, you know, I got to know the practice a little bit and understand. So I'm used to the farm smell, the hay, and other smells that you have in a dairy farm.
And you fell in love with agriculture.
I think I did. Yeah, I think it's true to say.
Which is where our food comes from. Well, Sarai, we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, as I told you, I followed Trendlines for a really long time, and I think it's a very interesting company. And so everybody listening, we're going to send you links to all these things we talked about. And that's it today. So Trendlines, thank you. Sarai, thank you. I'm Mark Gale from CO. Watch for another 5 and 15. We'll try to keep these fast, interesting, and useful for you. For 5 and 15 today, we're signing off. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mark.